Chapter 1. The Letter from Cincinnati. The morning fog still clung to the windows of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency when the letter arrived. It was thick, cream-colored, and sealed with deep blue wax, marked with the initials B.G. Allan Pinkerton stood at the window of his office peering down at Dearborn Street when his clerk knocked and handed him the envelope. Pinkerton slit it open with the brass knife he kept on his desk, unfolded the paper, and read silently. "Mr. Pinkerton, I write to you not out of panic, but reason. My business partner, Mr. Edwin Marsh, has disappeared. He left behind no note, no trace, only a burned scrap of correspondence and an empty office drawer where our most sensitive ledger once sat. I believe foul play is involved. The Cincinnati police insist he's absconded with funds, but I know Marsh better than that. I beg your discreet assistance. Time is critical. Respectfully, Bartholomew Griggs, First United Mercantile Trust." Pinkerton read the letter again, slower this time. Bartholomew Griggs was no ordinary banker. During the war, Griggs had managed financing for Union logistics, rail lines, artillery shipments, even battlefield hospitals. That kind of power bred enemies and secrets. Pinkerton moved to the cabinet by the far wall and withdrew a leather-bound journal labeled Confidential War Accounts. Flipping to the G section, he found 3 entries on Griggs, all clean, nothing suspicious. That made the sudden disappearance of his partner all the more intriguing. He snapped the journal shut. "Tell McCloskey to ready my travel case," he said to the clerk. "I'm taking the 8:20 train to Cincinnati." By evening, the city's gas lamps burned bright in the streets. Cincinnati had grown since the war. More factories, more smoke, and more men who thought themselves untouchable. Pinkerton made his way to the First United Mercantile Trust on Vine Street. It stood like a temple, tall white columns, polished stone steps, gaslights burning at the door. Inside, Bartholomew Griggs waited in a burgundy chair near the vestibule. He was a heavy-set man with a thick moustache and eyes that darted nervously. His suit, though expensive, was wrinkled and his collar sweat-stained. "Mr. Pinkerton," he said, standing quickly. "Thank you for coming." Pinkerton nodded. "Tell me everything." Griggs led him into a small office lined with books and oil portraits. He gestured for Pinkerton to sit, then poured 2 glasses of brandy. "Marsh has been missing 3 days. At first, I thought it a late trip. He often attended the theatre or went boating on the Ohio, but when he didn't arrive Monday to review our quarterly account summaries, I knew something was wrong." Pinkerton sipped the brandy. "The police?" "Dismissed it as embezzlement. Claimed Marsh fled with company funds. But nothing in our vault is missing. Only one item is gone, the black ledger." Pinkerton raised an eyebrow. "It was our private record of, let's say, sensitive wartime accounts, contracts, offshore transactions, nothing illegal," Griggs added hastily. "But not for public scrutiny." "And where was it kept?" "In a locked drawer in Marsh's office. The lock was smashed. We found this nearby." Griggs opened a drawer and handed Pinkerton a crumpled, singed envelope. It had been burned on one side, the edges curled and blackened, but the seal was still visible, a wax impression of an eagle with 3 stars above it. Pinkerton studied it carefully. "Recognize the seal?" Griggs asked. "Yes," said Pinkerton grimly. "It's from the War Department's Confidential Correspondence Division." Griggs paled. "I thought as much." "Have you been contacted by anyone unusual since Marsh vanished?" "One visitor," Griggs said. "A man with a stovepipe hat and gloves, asking if Marsh had returned from the ferry meeting. I said no. He left without giving a name." "Tall? Thin? Accent?" "Southern drawl, left a strong scent of tobacco." Pinkerton stood. "I'll need to see Marsh's townhouse." Griggs hesitated. "It's been closed, but I can give you the key." That night, Pinkerton stood in Marsh's study, a single lamp burning on the sideboard. The place was untouched since his disappearance, papers still stacked, an overcoat on the hook. Yet the room felt wrong. A porcelain vase lay shattered beneath the bookshelf. Pinkerton knelt and lifted a shard, still damp. Not old. There was something sticky beneath it. Blood dried into the carpet. He walked to the writing desk and ran his fingers across its surface. An ink blot, unusual given how meticulous Marsh had been, according to Griggs. A drawer hung slightly ajar. Inside, Pinkerton found a cravat, torn with a faint smear of what looked like soot or ash. And then, in the fireplace, barely visible among the embers, he spotted a curled edge of paper. Using tongs, he retrieved it, half-burned but readable. It bore a name. T.H. Pinkerton narrowed his eyes. He had a feeling he'd seen those initials before, and that this was no simple disappearance. This was a warning. Chapter 2. The Missing Partner. The morning air over Cincinnati was damp with river fog as Allan Pinkerton returned to the First United Mercantile Trust. Bartholomew Griggs met him at the rear entrance, clearly on edge. His bowler hat sat crooked, and he clutched a pocket watch with nervous fingers. "No sign of Marsh overnight," Griggs muttered as they entered. "No word? No sightings?" "I've spoken to his housekeeper. She's frightened. I believe someone's been watching the place." "Then we won't wait," said Pinkerton. "I want access to his personal files and correspondence, every drawer, every cabinet." They passed through the marble-floored corridor to Marsh's inner office. The room was grand, panelled in dark wood, with a wall of books and a massive desk that faced the window. But as Pinkerton looked closer, he saw subtle signs of disruption. The far right drawer had splinters around its lock. It had been forced open, not with a key, but a sharp implement. Pinkerton opened it slowly, empty except for dust and a faint ink stain. Whatever the black ledger had contained, it had been taken swiftly and without care. "I'll need to visit his townhouse again," Pinkerton said. Griggs nodded. "Take this. It opens every drawer and compartment he owns. Marsh was a man of habits. If anything's hidden, it's catalogued somewhere." Marsh's townhouse stood on a quiet residential street shaded by sycamores. Pinkerton let himself in and moved through the rooms with steady precision. In the study, sunlight filtered through linen curtains, casting a pale glow on the desk. He pulled open each drawer. Stationery, ink bottles, a worn Bible, receipts. But behind the desk, something caught his eye. The edge of the wallpaper was lifted slightly, curling outward. He ran his fingers along the seam and pressed gently. Click. A wooden panel swung open to reveal a shallow recess behind the wall. Inside, a narrow, black notebook. Not the ledger, but a personal journal. Pinkerton opened it carefully. Most entries were dry, banking appointments, client meetings. But one page stood out, written in haste. "Saw the man with the hat again, outside the theatre this time. Griggs says not to worry, but I know something's amiss. The ledger? It holds too much. If anything happens, tell Lenora. She'll understand." He flipped the page. One more line. He said Haskins' name aloud. Is he back from New Orleans? God help us. Pinkerton's grip tightened. Theodore Haskin. He hadn't heard that name in years. During the war, Haskin had been a shadow. Never charged, never exposed, but whispered about in corridors of power. He'd skimmed from union contracts, funneled arms to unknown buyers, and vanished just before Pinkerton could close in. Could Marsh have discovered Haskin's operations again? And why would Griggs, of all people, dismiss the threat? Pinkerton stepped outside. A milk cart rolled past. Across the street he noticed something. An elderly man pruning hedges, pausing to glance his way, then turning quickly. Pinkerton crossed. "Good morning," he said. The man looked up, startled. "Oh, good morning. You're not Marsh?" "No," said Pinkerton, "but I'm looking into his disappearance. Did you happen to see anyone around here the night he vanished?" The man wiped his brow. "Aye, 2 nights ago there was a ruckus, around midnight, heard something crash. I peeked out and saw a tall fella in a stovepipe hat, standing in the yard, smoking." "Did he go inside?" "He did. Came back out 10 minutes later with something under his coat. Didn't see his face clear, but I'll say this. He moved like a soldier, not a drunkard." "And what of Marsh?" "Didn't see him, but I did hear a woman's voice earlier that evening." "A woman?" "Yes. Young, well-dressed, spoke sharp, like from the theatre." That narrowed it. Pinkerton made his way to the Cincinnati Opera District. Inquiries at 3 theatres yielded nothing, but at the 4th, the Lyceum, the name rang a bell. "Lenora Tate?" said the stage manager. "Of course, she's in the chorus. Violet bonnet. Lovely voice, always late." "Is she in tonight?" "She's due for rehearsal." Pinkerton left a message and waited in the gallery until dusk. When the rehearsal ended, he spotted her exiting stage, left, bonnet tied under her chin, gloves in hand. He approached quietly. "Miss Tate." She turned, startled. Her eyes narrowed, then shifted to calculation. "You're not a patron." "I'm Allan Pinkerton. I'd like to speak about Edwin Marsh." She froze, her hand gripped her purse tighter. "He's missing. I have reason to believe you were the last person to see him." She looked away. "I don't know where he is. He told me he was in danger, that's all." "Danger from whom?" She hesitated, then turned back. "Do you know the name Haskin?" Pinkerton nodded slowly. "Then you already understand. Marsh said something was coming. That ledger, it's more than money. It's names, deals, from the war, things people would kill to keep buried." "Did you see the man in the stovepipe hat?" She looked directly at him now. "I saw him watching us, twice." Pinkerton stepped closer. "If Marsh trusted you, then you're already in danger too." "I know." "Then help me find him, before that man in the hat does." Chapter 3. The woman in violet. The next morning, the sky over Cincinnati turned a steely grey, threatening rain. Allan Pinkerton waited beneath the overhang of the Lyceum Theatre, watching the side alley where performers came and went. When Lenora Tate stepped into view, cloaked in deep violet, bonnet tied neatly under her chin, he stepped forward and fell into stride beside her. "I'm not here to trap you," he said calmly. "But if you know something about Marsh, you must speak. The longer you stay silent, the closer the man in the stovepipe hat gets." She glanced at him, calculating. "You carry yourself like a man who doesn't bluff." "I don't have time to," Pinkerton replied. She walked several paces in silence. Then, "Come with me. Somewhere we can speak freely." They stopped at a boarding house just off Walnut Street, up a narrow stairwell, and into a small parlour that smelled of lavender and dust. Lenora drew the curtains, then poured tea from a cracked china pot. "I met Edwin Marsh 3 years ago," she began, settling into a velvet armchair. "He came backstage after a show and quoted Shelley to me. Most men quote Shakespeare. I like that he didn't." Pinkerton said nothing, letting her fill the silence. He was different. Gentle, but always tense, like someone holding back too many secrets. At first I thought it was the bank, his work. But then I found out about the ledger. "You saw it?" "No, but he spoke of it often. It kept him awake at night." "He said it was blacker than ink, what it meant, not just what it said." He talked about shipments during the war, shell companies, payments that went nowhere, men who died for contracts signed in back rooms. Pinkerton nodded grimly. "And Haskin?" "That's when he started fearing for his life. Someone sent him a letter. He never let me see it, but he turned pale when he read it. He said, 'He's not dead. He's still watching.' After that, we started meeting in secret, Back entrances, church pews, boarding coaches. "Do you know where he is now?" Lenora hesitated, swirling her tea. "Number, not precisely, but I know where he planned to go if things got dangerous." Pinkerton leaned forward. "Where?" "A cabin near the river, not on any map. It belonged to his uncle, used to run rum down into Kentucky." Marsh said it was the only place he felt invisible. "Why didn't you tell Griggs?" Her lips tightened. "Because I don't trust him. Edwin said Griggs knew more than he admitted." "He said the real enemy wasn't just outside the bank, it might be sitting at the desk beside him." Pinkerton left the boarding house with the address scrawled on a scrap of paper. He walked briskly to the telegraph office and wired 2 trusted operatives in Chicago, Kate Warren and Timothy Webster. He needed eyes on Griggs now. If Griggs was playing both sides, Pinkerton wanted proof before the man even suspected he was under watch. From there, he hired a small river ferry and began navigating north, tracing the Ohio's bends until they reached a bank of weeping willows and half-drowned reeds. The ferryman pointed. "There's an old trail back there, used to be a bootlegger's path." Pinkerton nodded and stepped off. The woods were damp, the air thick with insects. He followed the trail for half a mile before he saw it, an old log cabin collapsed on one side, ivy crawling up its chimney. He approached cautiously, revolver drawn. "Mr. Marsh?" he called out. Silence. He moved inside. Dust coated every surface, cobwebs hung like curtains, but near the hearth, footprints, fresh. And on the table, a tin cup still wet with water. Someone had been here, maybe still was. He turned. Something moved in the woods outside. Pinkerton dropped low, gun raised, a branch cracked. He eased to the window and peeked through. A man, tall, thin, stovepipe hat. He was searching, scanning the trees, moving slowly but with purpose. Haskin. Pinkerton ducked behind the door and waited. The man drew closer, boots crunching under dry leaves, then stopped, 30 feet away. He turned his head sharply as if hearing something. Then in a flash, he vanished back into the trees. Pinkerton waited another minute, heart pounding, before emerging. The man had left a mark, a footprint in the mud, deeply pressed, and a smudge of tobacco ash beneath a pine. He was real. He was close. But there was no Marsh. By nightfall, Pinkerton returned to the city, his mind racing. Lenora had told the truth. Marsh had used the cabin. But now he was gone, and Haskin was closing in. If Pinkerton was to protect the banker and uncover the full contents of that black ledger, he'd need to think like Haskin, ruthless, silent, one step ahead. As he walked past the gas lamps toward his hotel, a boy rushed up with a note. "From the theatre lady," he said. Pinkerton opened it. The handwriting was hurried. "They're watching me now. I saw him outside my window. I'm not safe here. Meet me at the old train yard. Midnight. Bring no one." He read it twice, then folded it carefully into his coat. Midnight was coming fast. And so was the truth. Chapter 4. Midnight at the rail yard. The Cincinnati rail yard after midnight was a maze of darkness, oil, and steel. Freight cars loomed like shadows under the cloud-strewn sky. Lanterns swayed weakly on crooked posts, and the wind carried a low metallic whistle from a shunting engine in the distance. Allan Pinkerton stood near the old grain silo, just as Lenora Tate had instructed. He wore a dark overcoat, collar turned high, and carried no visible weapon, but a revolver sat snug in his pocket, loaded and ready. She was late. He scanned the yard carefully, broken crates, coiled hoses, the scent of coal and cold metal. Then, footsteps. Lenora emerged between 2 boxcars, bonnet pulled low, her coat too thin for the chill. She walked swiftly, glancing over her shoulder more than once before reaching him. "I wasn't followed," she whispered. "But I didn't want to risk going home. Someone knocked on my door half an hour ago, said nothing, just waited, then left. Did you see his face? Number, but I know it was him. The hat, the smoke, that man. He's circling me. Pinkerton nodded. What changed? Why meet me here? She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He sent this, to Marsh's address, but I intercepted it from the landlady. Pinkerton unfolded the page. The writing was spidery and faded, likely done with a blunt nib and shaking hand. The ledger is not yours. Return it or share Marsh's fate. T.H. Beneath it, a location was scribbled hastily. Foundry Row, Dock 3, tonight. Pinkerton's brow furrowed. The iron foundry, it's been shut down for months. He's luring someone there, Lenora said. Maybe me, maybe you. Or Marsh. They locked eyes. It was a trap, but one that might expose Haskins' hand at last. I'll go alone, he said. If he sees you, he'll bolt. Number, if I don't come, he'll know something's wrong. Pinkerton hesitated, then nodded slowly. But you follow my lead. We make no assumptions. Understood? She gave a tense nod. Understood. An hour later, they reached Foundry Row. The buildings were hollowed skeletons of brick and rusted steel. Dock 3 sat at the water's edge, a long loading platform beside the sagging warehouse wall. They crouched in the shadows of a collapsed trolley ramp. The wind off the Ohio was sharp. At exactly 2 a.m., a lantern flickered to life near the dock's center. A tall figure emerged, stiff, slow-moving, stovepipe hat, gloved hands. Pinkerton tensed. That's him. The man turned and placed something on the wooden dock, a flat, leather-bound book. Then he stepped back into the shadows behind a steel post. Lenora gasped. It's the ledger. Pinkerton rose slightly, preparing to move. Then, a sudden noise, fast footsteps. A second figure approached from the opposite direction, shorter, wearing a greatcoat. He bent down, picked up the ledger, and that's when the gunshot rang out. Crack! The man with the coat fell instantly, collapsing over the ledger. Blood pooled beneath him. Pinkerton drew his revolver. Stay down! He dashed forward, weaving between iron beams and crates. Another shot blasted from the darkness, chipping the brick beside him. He dove behind a hoist platform, peered around. Nothing. Whoever fired had vanished. He reached the body. The man was still breathing, barely. Not Marsh, younger, maybe a courier, a decoy. Stay with me, Pinkerton said, kneeling. He pried the ledger from beneath the man's arm. It was real, heavy, scorched along the edges, bound in black calfskin with a broken clasp. The man gurgled a final breath and went still. Pinkerton swore under his breath and scanned the darkness. Silence. Whoever pulled the trigger wasn't after the ledger. They were sending a message. Lenora helped him back to the street, pale and shaking. I've seen death on stage, she murmured. But never like that. That was cold, silent, no warning. That's how Haskin works, Pinkerton replied grimly. Quick, clean, and never leaves a face behind. He lifted the ledger. But this changes everything. Will you read it? I'll start tonight, somewhere safe. Where will you go? He looked down the empty road, rain beginning to fall. Where I can vanish for a while. By dawn, Pinkerton was inside a secure room at the local telegraph office, using their signal cipher room as a makeshift office. He laid the ledger flat, opened it to the first page, and found what he feared and expected. It wasn't just financial records. It was a web. June 3rd, $25,000 wired via Mutual Cotton Trust to J. Van Buren in New Orleans. Signed off, T.H. July 8th, special rail shipment, no manifest, routed via BG August 2nd, payment to LT for sustained cooperation, blackmail fund. He froze. LT, Lenora Tate? Was she deeper in this than she claimed, or was someone using her initials as bait? He flipped further. Every page built the same structure. Names, dates, movements of money, sometimes initials, sometimes entire names. Griggs, Haskin, even 2 government clerks he recognized from the Washington Procurement Bureau. This ledger was a death sentence for anyone it named. Pinkerton closed it, locked it in his satchel, and blew out the lamp. He had a choice to make. Expose it now and risk Marsh, Lenora, and himself. Or use it to draw Haskin out. The hunter had fired his first shot. Now Pinkerton would set the next trap. Chapter 5. The Judas Signature. Morning light spilled through the leaded windows of the safe house above the Cincinnati telegraph office, where Allan Pinkerton had stationed himself for the past 6 hours. His coat hung over the back of a wooden chair, sleeves damp from the night's rain. Before him, the black ledger sat open, its pages a spider's web of deceit, money, initials, betrayals. He had catalogued over 24 entries so far, but one stood out. Not for its amount or detail, but its placement. October 1st, payment authorized $8,000, route, via B.G. Bartholomew Griggs. This time no initials, a full name, no deniability. The date placed it well after the war's end, during Reconstruction, when military contracts should have been closing, not blooming. Pinkerton reached for a second notebook, sketched the connection chain. Griggs signs off payment, funds pass through Louisiana Ghost Company, ends in a numbered Swiss account. He sat back. Griggs is no innocent, he muttered. He's a gatekeeper. Which meant the disappearance of Edwin Marsh might not have been because Marsh stumbled upon corruption. It might have been because he refused to be part of it. Pinkerton left the safe house shortly after noon and made his way on foot to the Vine Street banking district. The First United Mercantile Trust loomed ahead, same as before, its stone face calm, indifferent, untroubled by murder. Griggs was in his office, sipping a cordial, when Pinkerton entered without knocking. "Mr. Pinkerton?" he greeted, blinking. "You look tired." "I've been reading," Pinkerton replied, placing the leather-bound ledger down on Griggs's polished desk. Griggs's smile froze. "What is this?" "Something your partner left behind." "I thought it was stolen." "It was. Then it was bait. Now it's truth." Griggs hesitated before touching the book. "I suppose I should be flattered you brought it here. You're in it?" Griggs blinked. "Excuse me?" "Several times, under initials. Once under your full name. October 1st entry. You authorized the payment, and I believe you did so knowingly." "That's an outrageous—" "Save it." Pinkerton's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Either you're in on it, or you've been too blind to notice your name's being used to facilitate fraud, murder, and possibly treason." Griggs's face turned pale, then stony. "You have no proof." "I have the ledger. I have a dead courier at Dock 3, and I have Marsh's personal notes." That last part was a lie, but it worked. Griggs swallowed hard. "Marsh kept notes?" "He did, with dates and names." Griggs leaned back. For the first time, he looked like a man cornered. "What do you want?" "I want Marsh, alive, and I want Haskin, in chains." Griggs was silent a long moment. Then he said, "There's a letter. Edwin sent it a week before he vanished. I didn't show it to the police." He opened a drawer and handed it to Pinkerton. The handwriting was neat, the tone urgent. "If anything happens to me, it's not random. Tell the truth. I won't sign the October ledger. I won't be your Judas. Burn this if you care about your life. Or mine." E.M. Pinkerton read it twice. "Where is he?" "I don't know," Griggs said flatly. "He didn't say, but I think he had help disappearing. A man named Fowler. He was one of our transport officers during the war, vanished too, and he used to run smuggling routes on the river." Pinkerton's eyes narrowed. "Where?" "Down near Ironton. Abandoned dockyard. I haven't seen him in years." Pinkerton stood. If Marsh is there and Haskin finds out, he's dead. By nightfall, Pinkerton was aboard a southbound mail coach with a pistol under his coat and the ledger tied tightly in oilcloth. The trip to Ironton took 5 hours, cutting through mud roads and half-washed towns strung along the Ohio like forgotten beads. He arrived near dawn and headed straight for the river docks. What remained of Dock 14 was more ruin than structure. Half a warehouse, rusted scaffolding, and a barge moored with frayed ropes. But signs of life lingered: wet footprints, a latched trapdoor, a kettle still warm from last night's fire. Pinkerton tapped the trapdoor 3 times with the butt of his cane. A pause, then a voice. "Who sent you?" "Someone who doesn't carry a Judas signature," Pinkerton said. The trapdoor creaked open. A pale, hollow-eyed man with a short beard and trembling hands appeared. "Marsh?" Pinkerton asked. "Yes," the man croaked. "You look like hell." "I've been in it," he said. They sat inside a narrow storeroom lined with crates. Marsh explained everything in a whisper. "I tried to pull out. Said I wouldn't sign the falsified books anymore. Griggs begged me, said it was only a formality. But I knew Haskin was still moving money. When I refused, I got a note. No signature, but I knew who sent it." "Don't be a Judas." Pinkerton placed the ledger on the table. "I've seen the entry." "Then you know, Griggs started clean, but he got used to the money. Then came Haskin, said we'd be protected, no one would find out, until someone did." "Who?" "A quartermaster in Louisiana. He came to me, showed me a letter. Haskin had him killed 2 weeks later. That's when I ran." "Why not go to the law?" Marsh looked at him with hollow eyes. "When men like Haskin buy senators, who do you report to?" Pinkerton didn't answer. He stood and walked to the door. "I need to get you back to Cincinnati, quietly. Then I'm going after Haskin." "Do you think you can catch him?" "I don't catch men like him," Pinkerton said coldly. "I hunt them." Chapter 6. The Man with the Ivory Cane. 3 days later, Allan Pinkerton stood in the smoky lobby of the Argus Club, an exclusive gentlemen's society in Louisville, known for housing the sort of conversations never meant for public ears. On the wall, a portrait of President Lincoln glared down at a card table where brokers and rail tycoons played poker in silence. Pinkerton ignored them. He had come for a man named Gideon Sharp, a former intelligence courier and one-time contact of Theodore Haskin. Word was Sharp had recently reappeared in the South, limping and rich, always seen with an ivory-handled cane and a diamond pin in his cravat. Pinkerton spotted him near the billiard room, laughing with a plantation air over glasses of brandy. Sharp's cane leaned against his chair. His gold watch chain swung in time with each smug breath. Pinkerton walked over slowly and stopped at the corner of the table. Sharp looked up, smile fading. "Do I know you?" "You do, and I know Haskin." The laughter died instantly. The plantation heir excused himself without waiting for an introduction. Sharp adjusted his cravat, eyes narrowing. "You've got a gall. Walking in here and saying that name aloud." "I'm not here for pleasantries. I want to know where he's headed next." "Why would I know?" Pinkerton sat in the chair opposite him. "Because your signature appears in the black ledger, next to entries tied to land deeds in Arkansas, deeds used to launder Haskin's stolen war funds." Sharp's jaw tensed. "I sold property, that's all." "You sold silence," Pinkerton said. "But you've seen him. I know you have. Last week, you took a riverboat to Memphis under the name Jeremiah Pike. You shared a cabin with a man in a stovepipe hat. You paid the porter to say nothing." Sharp's hands gripped the edge of the table. Pinkerton leaned in. "You want to walk out of this club with your fancy cane and all 10 fingers? You'll tell me where he is. Or I send your name to the War Department." A long silence passed. Then Sharp spoke. "He's in Milburn, 30 miles east of here. Using a warehouse near the rail lines. Claims it's part of a grain export company. But I've seen the crates, ledger books, war contracts, cash in sealed envelopes. He's getting ready to vanish again. Overseas. To where? Can't say, but he mentioned Vienna." Pinkerton stood. "You never saw me?" Sharp snorted. "I wish that were true." By nightfall, Pinkerton was on horseback, riding under heavy clouds toward Milburn. The town was small, a knot of taverns and silos along the Ohio-Kentucky border. He arrived just after midnight and rode past the silent train depot. 2 freight cars rested on rusted tracks beside a long brick warehouse marked M&H Vienna Exports. He tied the horse to a fence post and circled around the rear, stepping lightly over coal piles and broken tools. Inside the warehouse, faint lamplight flickered. Pinkerton crouched near a broken window and peered in. Haskin. Tall, cold, dressed in a grey coat and gloves. No hat this time, but unmistakable. He stood at a long table with 3 men, each sorting documents and sealing crates. One man held a ledger, another carried pistols. Suddenly a 4th figure entered, a young woman. Blonde, nervous, not Lenora. Pinkerton pressed closer. The woman handed Haskin a telegram. He read it, then burned it immediately. Then he spoke. "We leave tomorrow night. No mistakes. Vienna awaits." Pinkerton slipped away into the darkness. Back in town, he found a stable boy and paid him to ride to the nearest Union post office with a telegram. To Chicago headquarters. From AP target found, Milburn. Haskin active. 3 men. Export upfront. Prepare extradition order. Send agents, Warren and Webster immediately. Need diversion. Move swiftly. He returned to the shadows, took up position behind a flour mill facing the warehouse. He wouldn't sleep. He would wait. At dawn, 2 covered wagons pulled into town, one loaded with crates, the other empty. Haskin's men began loading quickly. Pinkerton, watching through his field scope, noted every license number, every box, every face. At exactly 8:07 a.m., a train whistle blew from the east, and then, a second later, shouting. From the depot, 2 Pinkerton agents burst into view, disguised as railway inspectors. One blew a whistle, the other waved a warrant. "Stop! This car hasn't cleared customs!" The men in the warehouse panicked. Haskin froze for a moment, then grabbed the blonde woman and bolted through the side door. Pinkerton was ready. He blocked the alley, revolver drawn. "Haskin!" The fugitive stopped, slowly releasing the girl. His eyes met Pinkerton's. "Still chasing ghosts, are you?" "Number just rats with polished boots." Haskin reached slowly for something in his coat. Pinkerton fired once. The bullet struck Haskin in the shoulder. He fell, snarling in pain, gun clattering onto the cobblestones. Within seconds, Warren and Webster appeared, pistols raised. Pinkerton stepped forward and kicked the weapon away. "It's over," he said flatly. Haskin looked up, face pale. "You don't know what you've interrupted." Chapter 7. The Trial of Shadows. The courtroom in Cincinnati was packed. Reporters scribbled notes, government agents lined the rear benches, and townsfolk sat forward in silence, drawn not by spectacle, but by the man in shackles at the defense table. Theodore Haskin, former Union contractor, now accused of war profiteering, fraud, bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder. At the prosecutor's table sat a thick folder, the Black Ledger, and behind the panelled gallery rail, Allan Pinkerton stood against the wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. It had taken months to get here. Marsh had returned under government protection, testifying under sealed deposition. Lenora Tate had vanished after giving her final statement. Pinkerton suspected she'd been placed in safe housing under a new name. And Griggs, once the city's golden banker, had not been charged, but the ledger ensured he would never sleep soundly again. But now the final piece was falling into place. The judge was a stern man with steel-grey hair and a voice like gravel. His gavel cracked the silence. "Proceed with the witness." The prosecutor, a young but sharp-tongued federal attorney named William Dunsley, stepped forward. "We call Mr. Allan Pinkerton to the stand." Pinkerton took the oath and sat straight-backed. Dunsley began. "Mr. Pinkerton, did you personally recover the ledger presented as evidence?" "I did." "From whom?" "From the possession of a courier employed by the accused. The courier was shot during an illegal handoff at Dock 3. Do you believe the accused ordered that shooting?" "Yes, it was meant as a message." "What did you find inside the ledger?" "A decade's worth of hidden transactions, payments to shell companies, bribes to officials, falsified rail shipments, and multiple entries approved directly or indirectly by the accused. Did any entries link to acts of violence?" Pinkerton nodded. "One showed a payment for silencing a Louisiana quartermaster. That man was found drowned 2 weeks later." Haskins' lawyer leapt to his feet. "Objection! Speculation." The judge raised a brow. "Sustained. Mr. Pinkerton, stick to facts." Pinkerton's tone remained calm. "The fact is, the payment was made. The man died shortly after. It fits a pattern across 7 entries. The jury scribbled furiously. Outside the courthouse during recess, Pinkerton stood under a tree, watching carriages roll by. Agent Kate Warne joined him, coat collar turned up against the breeze. "He's cracking," she said. "His lawyer knows it too. You saw his hands. He shook, just reading that page you marked." Pinkerton nodded. "He's used to fear being currency. That ledger turned it into evidence." She handed him a folded note. "Marsh sent this from the safe house. He wanted you to see it before the verdict." Pinkerton unfolded the page. "Allan, if I die before this trial ends, it wasn't natural. That man has reach you can't always see. He once bought a judge in Baltimore to erase an entire ledger from the Army's own archives. If you're reading this, and I'm gone, burn the original ledger. Make them rely on the copies. Don't give him a chance to reclaim it. He'll always come for it." E.M. Pinkerton folded it slowly and stared out at the courthouse dome. Back inside, the defense began its counterattack. Haskins' lawyer rose, voice loud and sharp. "Mr. Pinkerton, is it true that this ledger you obtained has no official seals, no confirming government origin? Could it not simply be a forgery?" "No," Pinkerton replied, "because 4 of the named clerks have already confessed, and each described entries exactly as they appear in the ledger, dates, names, amounts." "But you didn't witness the accused signing any document yourself, did you?" "No." "And yet you accuse him?" "I don't accuse," Pinkerton said. "The evidence does." The courtroom murmured. The judge rapped his gavel. Silence. The defense sat, teeth clenched. 2 days later, the jury returned. Pinkerton was not present in the courtroom. He stood instead in the courthouse clock tower, watching the street below through his spyglass. He preferred truth at a distance. Kate Warne approached from behind. "Verdict's in," she said softly. "Guilty on all counts." Pinkerton said nothing, just watched the gas lamps flicker below. "He'll serve time," she added. "But not enough. He's too connected." "I know," Pinkerton said, "but his name is in history now for what he really is. That ledger will never be clean again." Warne paused, then said, "What about Marsh?" "He's done. He wants out. I told him to take a new name and go west. He deserves a quiet life." "And Lenora?" Pinkerton's gaze lowered. "She chose to vanish. I hope she stays gone. The shadows are safer for her." That night, Pinkerton walked alone down a foggy alley behind the courthouse. He reached the river's edge, knelt by a barrel, and opened a wooden crate. Inside, the original black ledger, wrapped in canvas. He struck a match. Flames rose. The ink crackled. The pages curled. Names turned to ash. He watched until the last corner blackened. Then he stood, turned his coat collar up, and disappeared into the mist. Tomorrow there would be another letter, another case, another man who thought the truth could stay buried. But Pinkerton had seen enough to know the truth always finds a way back. Chapter 8. The Vanishing Ledger. A month had passed since the trial of Theodore Haskin. The names still made headlines, the ledgers of war, corruption in uniform, Pinkerton's reckoning. Yet beneath the noise the city had returned to its rhythm. Carriages on cobbled streets, merchants calling out in the square, and politicians denying what everyone now knew. In the quiet third-floor room of a law office on Madison Street, Allan Pinkerton sat across from a man he never thought he'd meet again. Edwin Marsh, clean-shaven now, dressed plainly, his posture no longer stiff with fear, but with purpose. "I heard the sentence came down," Marsh said. 12 years. "Less with good behavior," Pinkerton replied. "But he won't be able to move unnoticed again. Everyone knows his face now, and his methods." "I owe you my life." "You owe me the truth," Pinkerton said simply. Marsh nodded. "The ledger you burned, was it the only copy?" "No," said Pinkerton. "But it was the only original. The rest are transcribed, not photographed, enough to convict, but not enough to resurrect it as a weapon." Marsh sighed. "Then we're free of it." Pinkerton's face remained still. "You're free of it? I'm never free." "That ledger taught me something. Men like Haskin aren't rare. They're patient. They wait for history to forget." "And what about Griggs?" Marsh asked. "He still runs the trust. Still signs papers with the same gold pen." "He's watched now," said Pinkerton. "The government needs him as an informant more than they want him in a cell, but if he steps 1 inch wrong, I'll be waiting." A pause. Then Marsh reached into his satchel and withdrew a small black object, square, wrapped in muslin. Pinkerton's eyes narrowed. "What's that?" "Not a ledger," Marsh said, "and just something I kept, for when it ended." He unwrapped the cloth to reveal a small glass paperweight. Inside, encased in the resin, was a single page, burnt at the edges, faded but legible. One entry. October 1st. Payment authorized, $8,000. B.G. Pinkerton stared at it for a long moment. "Why keep that?" Marsh gave a weary smile. "To remind myself who I almost became." Pinkerton nodded slowly. "Keep it somewhere cold and far from fire." Later that afternoon, Pinkerton boarded the northbound train to Chicago. He sat alone, watching the Ohio River twist like a silver thread across the fields. The seats rocked gently with the motion, the coal smoke from the engine drifting past the window. Across from him, a folded newspaper bore the headline, "Pinkerton exposes ghost of war, agents hailed as heroes." He didn't smile. He never did when people used the word hero. Heroes fought battles out in the open. Pinkerton preferred the shadows, where the real truth lived. When the train stopped at Columbus for coal and passengers, a porter handed Pinkerton a telegram. It was unsigned, but the phrasing was familiar. "He's not gone, just shifted. The Vienna branch never closed. Recommend watching Doc 12. You'll know what to do. A friend." Pinkerton folded it, placed it in his coat, and stepped out into the crisp Ohio dusk. Across the platform, he saw a woman boarding a separate train eastbound, her bonnet pulled low, gloved hands carrying a leather case. She paused at the top step, as if sensing him. Lenora Tate. She never turned her head, but she didn't need to. She vanished into the train and he didn't follow. Some ghosts deserved peace, others didn't. Back in Chicago, Pinkerton returned to his headquarters. The detectives were busy, cases pinned to walls, maps spread across desks. The war had ended, but crimes had not. His agency had grown, but so had its burdens. He passed Kate Warne in the hallway. "Vienna?" she asked. "Maybe," he replied. She held up a dossier. "Another name, new contracts, different war, same rot." Pinkerton took the file, glanced over it, then looked out the window at the grey sky beyond. "There's always another," he murmured. That night, alone in his study, Pinkerton opened his locked drawer and removed a single sheet of paper. It wasn't part of the ledger. It was his own record, handwritten notes, never shared. When corruption wears a uniform, it becomes harder to shoot. When it signs checks, harder to trace, but when it leaves names behind, it bleeds like any man. He tucked it back inside. Then he doused the lamp, leaned back in his chair, and closed his eyes. Outside, the city breathed. Thunder rolled in the distance, and the man who hunted shadows waited for the next knock at the door, because darkness always returned, and so would he.